Hello, hello. What's going on? Is anybody out there? Is it just us? It's us and there we go. Christina, we got Scott. What's up, guys?
Hey guys, we had some technical difficulties. We were on time, but the computer did not cooperate. You know how that goes.
You put the kids to bed, and you think you got everything's going great, and then it wasn't. So we're glad we're glad you're here. Yeah. So welcome. Yeah. Hey, I'm in the
That's
meeting. Yeah.
right. Good job. Thank you for hanging on tight. I love it. Thank you for hanging for a little bit. You know how technology is. It's like it works whenever it wants to.
hanging hanging by a moment. See, that's why we're so excited to get back to some live events, so get off this Zoom stuff. This is fun, but so give us a minute. Let me close all 37 of our Zoom windows that are open up on our web browsers here because we're trying to set passwords and do all that and pull up our PowerPoint. And we're gonna be talking about some creative financing stuff here tonight. And we're excited because this has been a big part of our business. Christy said something really cool last night. She said, I don't care what anybody says. You need money. Money's the most important thing outside of finding deals for us as investors. So
Yeah, we
I
always
think
hear the
she was
same
right.
common, complaints or not even, I mean, it's sort of complaints and it's sort of just feedback from people. Because when I always ask someone when I'm coaching them or talking to them, what's your biggest hurdle in the business or what are you having difficulty? And it's always marketing and finding the money, right? That's the biggest things. But I said, marketing, I don't think really is the key. I think people think that, but really it comes down to the money and they just bring that up. But yeah, so we want to talk about money tonight. And we talked about raising private money in the past, but I think it's really important to talk about creative financing because sometimes we think that the only way to do a deal is to go to the bank or use a hard money lender or use a private money lender. And what's interesting is there's many more ways to leverage other people's properties, and the deals. So if you don't know those, a lot of times you're missing out, I think, on a lot of opportunities. So it's really important to learn these strategies and keep them in your back pocket. Because what we're coming across is a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily fit the fix and flip model or the wholesale model. So it's like, okay, well, what can I do with this to make money? So these are going to be some of the options we're going to go through this evening. And these are actually options that we've used in deals for the last couple years. And these are actually deals that we've used just like strategies we used just recently, like in the last couple months, which are pretty cool.
For sure. I was making sure we got our Q&A box up. And I guess it's not a chat box. I guess it's a question and answering box. So we're good. We're ready to rock and roll. So
Cool. And if you guys have any questions, please type them in or speak up or feel free to put your face in here, right? um, but again, this just gives a little bit of background about us. Noah and I are located in Columbia, South Carolina, and we've been investing 10 plus years, which sounds crazy in my mind. We've really been investing through all facets of the market, which is pretty cool. Like we've seen the ups and downs of the market and the craziness of the market right now, and literally have applied probably every real estate strategy, I would say, combined in our investing history.
yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of them anyways. So, but here's what's cool. If we don't know the answer to something, we're not going to sit here and make it up. We'll get on the line and call our attorney, maybe not tonight, but we'll get back to you if you have any questions or whatever. So we're huge believers in guys. And this is really important too. I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, hey, Noah, get to the meat and the potatoes, get to the nuts and the bolts, right? But I would say this is probably like one of the most important things that I'll say is, really surrounding yourself with the right people. So we're going to talk about some stuff here tonight that you're probably absolutely are going to need a real estate attorney to help you with. So if you're in the Columbia area, we use Gary Pickren of Blair Cato for a lot of our stuff. And we also use Bell Carrington as well. If you're in Columbia, South Carolina, those are our two closing attorneys. And David Ruppel is also great here in Lexington. So, but when we talk about seller financing and lease options, obviously they're going to involve contracts. So, and one of the things that we're going to want to really convey and be able to show a seller is, hey, like we know what we're doing, and it's okay if we don't know everything, but our team does, right? So your attorneys are a part of that team. So if you don't have someone that you work with right now, I highly recommend picking up the phone and reaching out to different real estate attorneys who can help you draw up this stuff. And
And don't cheap out. People
yeah,
get super cheap. And listen, I'm all about saving money and being thrifty, especially when you're starting. We've talked about marketing on a shoestring budget. And, there's some things you can get away with doing that will, you can do on a budget. But like literally, when you're doing a creative financing strategy, use an attorney to draft the paperwork. Use them to do a title search on the property. Make sure the person you're talking to is the owner of the property. These are ways that people get into trouble in real estate deals that it could have easily been prevented for 150 bucks. And when we show you like the deals that we've done and the money we've made off of them, you're going like, oh, 150 bucks compared to that, like why would you not? But I know I've been there, right? Like you can watch a million YouTube videos, you can Google contracts online, you can do everything, but if you don't have that local person looking over it, one little mistake could cost you the property, money, everything, your whole business.
yeah,
So
and people are going to ask, it's going to be like, well, who's going to draw up these documents, or is this legitimate? Is this the right way? Am I doing things the right way? And don't. It's nice to be able to say, hey, don't take my word for it. I'm not going to draw up anything. I'm going to have my legal team, my real estate attorney, take care of everything, so that we are both know that we're doing things the right way, right? So that's really important.
And of course, on this slide, you know us if you follow us on social media or see her. We have three boys actually, but just two in the picture here. Noah has a 17-year-old son as well. So this is our life, our family. This is why we do this business full time. We're big fans of real estate, keeping it real, and just lifestyle by design. So that's what we want to teach you how to do tonight too, as well. So
Yeah, we're Christy said something funny that night. She said, I'm sick of everybody trying to be an expert. I'm trying to like get what was the word? It was not like, you weren't like saying you wanted to get dumber, but you're like, I'm trying to like not be the expert anymore and just have like
yeah,
surround myself with other people. It's just,
it's like everybody wants to
yeah.
be the expert and the most known person, and I just don't
But
get it. Like, I don't want to be the Kardashians of real estate. Like, I don't want to have that much stress on my life. I just want to do the business and help people and really just relax, right? And
yeah.
kick back. And I think that's key to the business.
So we're just real estate investors like you guys. So Christina said, we are in Charleston, but working in upstate and a little in Columbia. Any real estate attorneys, right?
Yeah. So here's the thing. You're looking for someone in the Charleston market. What I would tell you is those attorneys here in Columbia that we reference, reaching out to them and asking them, a lot of them have like parent attorneys that they work with in all these markets. And some of them have other offices. I know Bell Carrington just isn't out of Columbia. They have another office location. So that's the cool part. If you're looking for someone in that area as well, and we can ask about that and post it, too, and let you know, but reach out to those people because they'll be able to reference you to someone else.
Yeah, not a lot of people know this too, but Gary Pickering wrote this South Carolina realtor contract. So all the contracts all the real estate agents use for the state of South Carolina, he wrote that. So he's a good person to get on your team, whether you're using him or he can refer you to somebody. So here we go. So this is probably one of our favorites. It's seller financing, owner financing. And really it is what it sounds like. So the very first option, and this is something that Christy can talk on, I'm sure, because, even if we're buying properties on the MLS, we always ask if the owner would be willing to owner finance. Every single time we have our agent ask that. Right.
And I'm sure you're thinking right now and all the time, like in such a competitive market, especially for you, those of you who have been making multiple offers on the MLS, you're thinking in your mind, why in the world would somebody that could take an all cash offer off the MLS right now, above and beyond asking price, why in the world would they owner finance? Why would I even ask that? Christy, no, that sounds stupid. Why would I do that? They're not going to take that. So listen, here's the deal. What we're finding is a lot of people, mostly older baby boomer age landlords, are willing and want to owner finance. It's not even that their agent sometimes doesn't even put that in the description, because an agent's job is to sell that property, right? They want to get their commission and be in and out. But for an owner, it really actually benefits them to do seller owner financing, because when they sell the property, they have to pay all the taxes on their property right now, right? Because they sold it within that tax year. If you're willing to owner finance or seller finance, what that means is basically that landlord is now going to be the bank to me. So they're going to be basically the Wells Fargo, and they're going to create a monthly mortgage that I pay them. So they're holding the note on that actual mortgage. So for them, there's tax benefits that help them. So a lot of times, if you bring that up, they're definitely open to it. And what's cool about it, that from my seller financing experience, a lot of people worry about, especially when you're getting started in the business. And even when you're in the business, if you own a couple properties and you're an entrepreneur, the truth is, guys, your credit is not always an 800 credit score, even though we strive for that. If you've got things in your name, if you're leveraging money, a lot of times your credit isn't the greatest, that you could go to the bank and get financing on a property. But for seller owner financing, that owner 9 times out of 10 is not going to ask about your credit. They're not concerned about that. Now, they might ask for a minute down payment, and that's basically going to allow you to be able to not have to use your credit to do that. That kind of helps get you in the game to do this. So remember, this is a great strategy for, whoever starting off or experienced, really.
Yeah. So, why would someone do this? Like Christy mentioned, maybe they have some tax advantages, things like that. One of the things that we've always done is just spent a little bit of time building rapport with the seller, and then asking them, hey, like, what are you going to do with all this money? Like, when we buy this house, like, do you have any plans? Like, are you going to put it into another property or whatever? And lots of times they don't have a plan, right? Or they might be using a little bit of it for something, but lots of times they'll say, well, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it yet. Or just, I'm like, oh, you're gonna put it in the bank, for until you figure it out, or right. And then be like, yeah, well, we all know that banks are paying, 0.5% interest rate in a savings account, right? And so and that hurts, right? And so you kind of laugh with the seller, you're like, oh man, he's putting the savings 0.5%. Tell you what, when I go to buy this house, like, I'm going to be using private funding, and I pay my investors anywhere from 6, 7, 8, sometimes even 10% rates of return, depending on what you wanted to do with it, keep it or flip it. Would you be interested in making those types of returns instead of putting your money in savings and making 0.5%? Would that be something you might be interested in? Right. And you can tell them, hey, if you're like, let's say you're flipping a house and you say, hey, look, I'm imagining we'll be in and out with the renovations and the rehab between 6 to 8 months. During that time frame, I'd love to pay you maybe 10% rate of return on your money. Would you be interested in something like that? Or if Christy and I know that after we're running all of our numbers, and we know that our financing costs, let's say on a deal, if we hold it for 6 months or 8 months or whatever, it might be $15,000 that we're going to pay someone interest and points and all this stuff. What if I went to the seller and said, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's the deal. I'm probably going to bring in funding for this from a private investor, but if you'd be willing to owner finance, I could actually pay you $15,000 more. In the timeline 6 to 8 months. Is that something that might interest you?
And then it makes the terms negotiable for them. It allows them to make money, but allows you to get the deal done because you don't have to pay for the cost of hard money, points, closing, all of that. And this scenario, Noah talked about the rehab and flip method, but it was really interesting. Probably, I mean, this was like a couple years ago. We had a landlord who was a tired landlord, a great gentleman who inherited a property. His name was George. His aunt and uncle left him the property. He was the worst landlord in the world, the nicest guy in the world. That's why he was the worst landlord. He's let people live for free. They were always telling him a story. So this poor guy inherited this property free and clear, which should have been a huge moneymaker. It ended up being not a moneymaker and the biggest nightmare for him. He was like, I'm over it. Like, I just don't want this property anymore. And we did a bandit sign that said, tired landlord, sell me your home. That was like a ad that we ran. He called us based upon that. Well, after we talked to George a little more, it wasn't about the money. Like, George didn't need the money. He wasn't hurting at all. But it was more like, hey, we can help you create a steady income stream, because that's what you really wanted to do, right? That's why you had the rental property. You thought you were going to be making $300 a month on this, but now you're in the hole way more than that because nobody's paid in 8 months. He's like, absolutely. And the cool part was the property needed work. So for him, it was like, oh gosh, well, I don't have the money to put into the work. I inherited this property. So I was able to owner finance that from him, put a couple of repairs into the house. And what we did was we negotiated a lower price. I believe we actually got under contract right around 50,000. and we put like 10,000 in it, and we ended up selling it to someone. And we'll talk about this strategy in a little bit. We ended up selling it to someone on a lease to own. So what was cool is we were able to help George, help ourselves. And you see on here on the PowerPoint, it says negotiate a balloon payment. So what that means is we amortize the mortgage over 30 years, just like you would go to the bank and get a 30-year mortgage, because that made our payment monthly very, very low. And with owner seller financing, you have to come in and you basically are paying the taxes, right? You're paying all this stuff. So that's rolled into also the payment that you're making. You have to pay the taxes and everything out for that. So when we paid George a very low monthly payment, he asked for a 5-year balloon payment. So which meant that in 5 years, we had to pay off that balance that we owed him. So we had a $50,000 note with George. We had to pay him monthly payments. Every monthly payment, a portion of it applied to the principal. So in 5 years, when we finally had to cash him out, which again, we ended up selling it to somebody on a lease to own that ended up buying it. I think our payoff was like right around $45,000 or $46,000. And what was cool is during that 5-year time period, the equity grew in that property. So we were able to sell it for a lot more than when we bought it 5 years prior. And we were able to like leverage that house without using our credit, without using anything. So guess what? We could have done 40 of those deals if we found 40 people open to that, which was cool.
Yeah, totally. And again, it's negotiable, right? So, and I love that point. You say lots of people get into real estate because of the idea of cash flow and financial independence. But if they're not cut out to be a landlord like George was, and he didn't hire property management, trying to do everything himself, at the end of the day, he just wanted cash flow. And so if you can just figure out, talk to people, say, hey, how can I serve you? Like, what are you going through right now? Like, what was your goal with this? How did you end up where you're at? And is there a way where we could help this person? Right. And that's where the creativity comes into play, and you create the money, right? You create the funding. So got a question here. Can you give an example of a structure for, say, $150,000 property with about 40K rehab needed? I'll ask you a question about that to get a little more detail. What would you say the property is worth when you put the $40,000 into it? Do you know that number? Because that's really important too. So after you buy it, put the $40,000 renovation in, how much do you think that property is going to be worth, Christina? And I think we can give you a little bit more guidance on that.
Because this is the fix and flip model of, hey, there's a property. We know we can put some money into it. We know we can fix it and flip it. But what does that look like for the person holding the note for seller financing? And also, where do we come up with the money for the 40K rehab, and how do we structure that? And it's an Airbnb hold. Okay, cool. So we're going to actually talk about an Airbnb hold in just a minute. So I might kind of hold off on that and use the model of the sample that we have to actually kind of physically show you with different numbers, but same concepts, to give you just an idea.
Yeah, we got one that's real similar to that. I think it might be the next slide. Let's see. All right. So, no, but we're getting there. We're getting there. All right. So this is actually a slide that we stole from, actually, ironically, an Airbnb presentation that Christy did with Milani. And really, this is a way of controlling a property. And what Christy was explaining on a webinar that she did with Milani, who does Airbnb education, was, hey, instead of going to a landlord and saying, hey, I'll rent the property from you, and then turning around and doing the Airbnb, which I guess they call arbitrage, right? What if we took a couple extra steps to secure our position and be able to capitalize on the trend of where real estate's going, which is up, right? As properties continue to rise in prices, you see all these Airbnb people who are like, hey, I'm going to lease this property and then turn around and Airbnb it, which is great, could be great cash flow, but there's no true wealth building there. There's no, you imagine working closely with a home where you're cleaning it, renting it out, Airbnb, maintaining, like it's yours. And then 2 years down the road, the house is worth, twice as much, or, gone up a tremendous amount of value. And the landlord says, you know what, I'm going to sell it now.
And you can't tap into that equity because you have no ownership within it. You were really just leasing it to make the monthly cash flow. So, and while that's a great strategy,
great strategy, nothing wrong with making money.
Something else you should have in your pocket. But Noah and I's philosophy is, how do we build equity and property to keep long term, not only for us, but for the children one day? Or how do we keep those for a long time? Then at a retirement age, one of those homes was actually a retirement vehicle. And that's our whole retirement right there in one house. Let's sell it, right? Or a portion of that. So we started looking at the lease with the option to buy. And this strategy was huge. And this is where I started using it actually in 2007, 8, like when the market, kind of tanked and went downhill. Because as you know, what was happening is a lot of people were upside down. Not only that, a lot of people were losing their homes. Or a lot of people wanted to sell and they had equity, but nobody was buying because everybody was afraid to buy anything during that time or their credit wasn't good. So that posed a position of a lease with the option to buy. And it's a really cool strategy. We actually just used on an Airbnb literally 2 months ago. And now we're doing that short-term rental, making money on it now. So we'll kind of walk you through what happened with the gentleman. So this guy, another landlord. So I hate to say this, but I love my bad landlords because as a landlord and as an investor, everyone goes in with the idea that they are going to buy this property. It's going to make them so much money. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be easy, only to find out that doesn't happen because most people, the first time they hear someone can't pay rent, they feel bad. They let them live. And then, after that time period passes, it's the next
They let them
excuse.
live. They don't kill them.
But they let them live in the property. They don't let them leave, then now what's happening is with the eviction laws, they can't even get people out. So now you're stuck with this property that you can't even pay your mortgage. So it's like this slippery slope that literally, I would say 8 out of 10 landlords get into that position. If they don't put it with property management, they do it themselves. So what ended up happening with this, so since we're in Columbia, we have the University of South Carolina, and USC, of course, last year when COVID happened, shut down all classes and, kids weren't on campus anymore and they were virtual learning. So what parent's going to let their child continue to live in a rental while they're virtual schooling? Some did, right? We actually have a college student that did do that. But most are going to say, no, you're coming home for the year, forget it. Well, and this is really big. So anytime we buy a property, we look at it from a perspective of, can we make the money for this rental with just a long-term tenant, right? Like you have to be able to cover and net your money and cash flow that with just a long-term tenant in any property you buy. Now, the icing on the cake is, oh, now we can short-term rent this and make 3 times the rent. Okay, that's awesome. But in this situation, this is exactly, what kind of happened. So a lot of landlords here buy based on the university and the students, and they rent by the room. So this gentleman that owned the property lived in the upstate in Greenville. He actually was renting the room, $700 a room, 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, little brick house, great little historic district. So he was making $2,100 a month renting that. The thing was, his mortgage, tax, insurance, everything are $1,400 a month even. So that cash flow was great by terms of a rental when college was in. Well, guess what? Come April, he had no tenants because he tried to put a long-term tenant in, and in that same neighborhood, you probably can only make max maybe $1,400. So he wouldn't have even been cash flowing it. He would have been losing money. So his idea was like, well, I'm just going to put it with a property management company and see what they can get. Well, you know what that property management company did? They marketed it for, he found one bad one semi-decent, and they marketed it for 9, 10, almost 11 months with nobody in the house. He was forking out $1,400 a month. So this lead was actually brought to me from another local investor that didn't really know what to do with it. But he's like, hey, I'm just trying to make contacts with investors. You guys want to come see this property? So when I walked in, I was like, whoa, this is great for a short-term rental. This thing is amazing. I was like, okay. And, based on that guy's numbers where he bought it, his payment's kind of high. We have a lender that will actually lend if we can get the rate lower. So actually renting it to a full-time tenant would still work if we had to, but I knew we could Airbnb. There's like 3 other Airbnbs on that street. So we started looking at it from the perspective of like, what could we really make on this? And I estimated between $2,500 and $3,000. Is what we can make. So looking at like this guy's payment, $1,400 a month, we talked to him and we said, hey, here's what we're interested in doing. And we're going to be very transparent. We want to keep the mortgage in your name. I don't want to switch that right now. I have a lot of other projects going on, but we're willing to make you a $1,400 a month payment, right? But again, we want to buy it at a discount because it did need some work. There's a foundation issue that isn't really an issue right now. If we ever sell it one day, we'll have to fix it. But there was like some minute stuff. It needed to be painted, freshened up, made cuter than what it was to short-term rent. But my goal was, hey, let's just get it under contract with him for a low amount, and then let's make the monthly money. And that is now the comps in the neighborhood are right around what sold.
Probably 285, 325, a couple doors down. We're in for 185.
So we have it under contract with the lease with option to purchase for 185. So we got a massive discount on the front side, and have a bunch of equity. And then we're also leveraging his mortgage and his name on that to be able to just pay the monthly payment. And then we take anything above that $1,400 a month.
Right. And so one thing what I would say too, Christina, so like the previous slide, seller finance, this is best if there's no current mortgage, if the person owns it free and clear. Makes it very simple, because that way you're not if there's a mortgage, sometimes the bank will not allow for someone else to come in and purchase it while they're still holding the note. So you have to make sure that if there is a mortgage, that's allowed, or maybe it's assumable. But most of the time, seller financing is going to be best if there's no mortgage on the property. With the lease with the option to buy, that's nice because that's not really as relevant. One thing that you got to keep in mind too, and if with the 150,000, if that's like what the person owed or that's what they wanted, I think you could easily, or not easily, but simply explain to the seller the idea of making money on their money, having monthly cash flow, letting them know that it doesn't have to be something that is for 30 years. You could come, say, hey, for the next 2 years or 5 years or whatever the case may be, that you guys agree upon. They agreed to hold the note for that time frame. But you also got to make sure too, like, what's your exit strategy? So like, if you're planning on cashing out and refinancing, from a traditional lender standpoint, they're going to want to see, they're going to give a loan that's around 80% loan to value. So basically what that means is, if the ARV is 200 right now, if you went to refinance, then the bank's going to say, okay, we'll give you 160. So not that there's anything wrong with that, because that could easily cash out the 150. But where does the other 40,000 come into play? So if that's money you're coming out of pocket, then maybe that's fine, right? It's a good investment. You're going to make money on that cash investment. But if you're using a private lender for, like, let's say the 40 grand, and you want to be able to pay off the $40,000 loan and the 150, with bringing as little to the table as possible, always keep in mind that you're most likely going to get a loan, or be able to get a loan, for 80% of the ARV.
So basically that scenario, Christina, that you used of the after repair value of 200,000, the property purchase 150, and it need about 140 rehab, you're going to have to go in and run your numbers based upon that 200,000, buying it below market value, which we use 70% below market value minus repairs. So you're going to have to get that for actually a lot less. So to use our example, so we locked up that property at 185. We put 15,000 into it. Now that 15,000 can come from wherever. Like, ours came from a home equity line of credit we have on another property. So we're all in 200,000 on that property right now. And then outside of that, we're looking at, okay, where do we go from there? How much is it worth? So as Noah said, it's worth about 285 plus, right? And we're looking 2 years ahead. We can refinance right now, and we know it's worth that. 2 years ahead, it might be worth more than that, 300, 325. Yeah. So
yeah, maybe that Airbnb, is in an up and coming area, and
maybe we do flip it in 2 years. Maybe we don't refinance it and keep it. What do we care? We know how to find property at a discount. So,
and maybe your $200,000 places, in a couple of years more. And, so just keep in mind when you go to refinance, that's kind of like what they're going to be looking at.
And what it's important. So how do you get your funding for seller financing? And, meaning, like, I guess the rehab cost for that, you have to look at that person, that the gentleman that's holding the note on this, he's the first position. He's not even really the first position per se. The bank is, right? Because he has a mortgage with the bank. So now we're looking at where can we come up with money for that? So again, it could be a home equity line of credit. It could be a private money lender that has money. It could be, hey, listen, could it have been him? He's an investor. Actually, he flips properties. Could I have asked him, hey, not only can we buy that for 185, would you be willing to lend us 15 grand that we pay you interest on as well to do the rehab on this? That could have worked too. Maybe he's got 15 grand sitting around not doing anything. So there's many ways to get money. And that comes down to like just raising the capital. Other investors are your best place to start because they do this business. Sometimes we think like, oh, we have to get a private money lender. Let me talk to everyone I know that has money and let me talk to this person, that person. Talk to another investor. Like that's what they do. And 9 times out of 10, most investors are not that good. Like they're doing all the work themselves. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
everyone's an investor right now, right? What does that mean? I don't know. Like, sure, everyone's an investor. I don't know. Everybody can buy a property and flip it right now. The market's great. But the real thing is, do they have a system in place? And also, if they're the technician, which is a lot of investors that we know locally, they're doing all the work themselves. They're only able to do 1 or 2 properties. It takes them forever. What if I went to them and was like, look, it's taking you 8 months to finish this rehab. I can do it 1.5 to 2 and sell. How, would you want to lend money to us? How about that? We'll pay you 10% on your money. So just know, like, these people are out there. You just have to ask them.
Yeah, we're and with seller financing too. Like, what's cool is, Christy loves the idea of seller financing, always asking for it, and especially if it's like an older seller, because 9 times out of 10, if they have a lot of real estate, they probably acquired that real estate by doing creative financing strategies. If you think about, the early 80s when interest rates were like in 20% and stuff, like people had to do creative financing to buy real estate and to build portfolios, and they became better investors because of it. So what's cool is when someone comes to them and says, hey, would you be open to this? Like, we, in our mind, sometimes we think, oh gosh, what if they say no, or they're not going to like this? But they actually really do like it because they understand the value in it. And they also understand that, hey, this is how I built my wealth. And they've probably owner financed other stuff too,
And really, what's the worst situation that can
yeah,
happen? They get the property back, right? So like in a owner finance, seller finance situation, they have to foreclose on so let's say I default on payments. Let's say someone seller financed to me the property and I decide that I'm not going to make the monthly payment. Then they just come in and foreclose on me and get me out of the property and they get the property back. So reality is, but we're never going to get to that point because 9 times out of 10, what happens, and we just encountered this. There was a gentleman that owned a property management company that owner financed this property right downtown in Elmwood. They financed these 2 gentlemen that were supposed to get financing and buy. Well, guess what? These guys have lived in there like 15 years. These guys don't even want to leave the house. Like that's the God's honest truth. They want to buy it, but guess what? They never got their credit up. Now they're in a financial hurdle. Their health is bad. So they are like, we just want to sell it. But we put all this money into it, owner financing. So what ended up happening is I was confused at first about the situation. I was like, wait, you don't own this house. I pulled the tax record. Who owns it? And they're like, Mr. Smith owns it. He's the property management company. He owner financed this to us 10 years ago. But we can't, we owner financed it for 120,000, I think. They're like, we still owe 110, but we can't get bank financing and our health is bad. We just need to move out. So I was like, oh, let me go to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith said, hey, I'll re-owner finance it. I'm cool with that. Like, I have no problem re-owner financing with you guys to buy. You just got to work it out with them because basically I just don't want the property back. So let's just make it happen. Didn't end up working out for us because the numbers the numbers kind of made sense, but the timing was off for us for this property because it was a big rehab. But that being said, I was like, whoa, this is awesome. This guy can do this 5 times over. Same with the lease option. Guess what? 2 years we have to cash out this property. We told this gentleman, listen, we'll get the mortgage out of your name in 2 years. Well, what happens at year 2 if we don't get it done? Guess what? He gets the property back. Guess what? That property is way nicer than when he just owned it. So what's the pitfall? We pay his mortgage for 2 years and he gets the property back, then he sells it. It's not a bad situation to be in. So that's why people are willing and open to do that.
yep. And yeah, you answer your question, you can get a second position. I don't see anything wrong with that. Just the numbers have to make sense for the lender, right? And
Right.
they're gonna want to make sure that there's equity in the deal. And what's cool too, guys, is understand like your financing options too, like whether it's with a bank, a hard money lender, or thinking about the end game of when you go to refinance, and you just tell people these are the facts. Like, this is how I'm going to end up having to get this refinance and show them the numbers. And when you do, sometimes they realize that it's not going to work out for anyone unless they're coming in and paying all cash, and they have to lower their price. And, if you just show them all the things that you're going to go through and you need to go through to get the financing done, let that be like leverage in your negotiations to show people that maybe their property is a little overpriced and need to come down a little bit.
And what was funny about this guy is he was like, do you have any banks you work with that can refinance this? I've got 2 that I've used before in the past. So he was all like, hey, I want you to buy this property. I don't care. I'm done with it. I'm over it. I live in the upstate. Like, I'll help you as much as I can. So that was like really cool. Cause that's the other thing. A lot of times people are trying to make deals that aren't deals into deals. And I've been there like, oh, this is such a great opportunity. We got to make it work. The truth is it either works or it doesn't work. That's it. Like, either it's going to work with that seller, it's going to come back. We've made offers. We have one under contract to seller finance. It was an attorney who owned a commercial building downtown. And it was a great, he said, yeah, I'll owner finance it, but I only owner finance at 150. I said, well, I only owner finance it at 120. Guess what? It didn't work for either of us. I was like, cool, I'll catch you in August when that same property hasn't sold, because you're not going to get 150. And again, it's been going in and out of contracts. I've been watching it. So the reality is, like, I get it. It's either going to work or not. And if not for them, probably for someone else. And what happens if an owner, a seller finance buyer defaults and refuses to leave? But the owner wants to sell cash for keys. Yeah, you can try to do cash for keys to get someone out. Worst case scenario, you foreclose on them. That's it. Like, that you go through the foreclosure process in your state and your county, which sounds awful, but it is what it is. It's real estate, right? Like, you run a risk on everything. Now, I'll tell you this on some of our stuff. Now, whether this will hold up in court or not, it is what it is. But I think sometimes it's how you set things up and the mental thought process. Anything we do a seller finance, because we've done that to someone on like a mobile home. It's like, well, what if they stop paying? So I put, basically, if your payments on your seller finance contract is not in by the 10th of the month, it automatically rolls to a rental agreement. You've lost your rights to seller finance it. So I've done that. Now, I've never had to enforce that or use that, but the mentality that you're signing all this legally with someone, hopefully, basically at that process, they go, oh shoot, I'm just renting now. You know what? I'm just going to walk away from it. And actually, a mobile home, we did owner finance twice. That both people walked away from it and we got it back. And they didn't ask for any of their money back. But you can listen, if somebody's been there for 5 years and they were supposed to pay it off in 10 and they fell into financial hardship and lost their job, sure, give them $1,000 to walk. What does it matter? You've made money on that. I mean, I'm not here to like stick it to anyone. You know, that to me is just bad karma.
So to answer your question, yeah, so they would foreclose. So you would make sure, always make sure that you have a mortgage or a deed of trust, depending on your state. Here in South Carolina,
And again, do it with an attorney, file it
with the attorney, or have the attorney file it, make sure they write it, get a mortgage. That's your security if you're the seller. And yeah, you would go through the foreclosure process. Now, essentially, they're the bank, right? So banks sell loans to other banks all the time. So if a person wanted to sell their loan, they could sell their loan to someone else, maybe at a discount or whatever.
Now, does that other person want the property with that person?
And then that
it?
person, maybe
they
they see the value in it and they want to go through the foreclosure process because they see that as an investment, right? That happens all the time.
Yeah. So
all right, let's
wait, there's something on there you missed, the first right of refusal document to protect you.
Yeah.
So cover that.
So when we do this lease with the option to buy, we have an addendum the seller signs and we file it with the county, and it's a first right of refusal. Basically, that clouds the title. So like, let's say we have an agreement to buy the property for $150. We're gonna cloud the title. That's gonna show up if, let's say, the person tries to go behind your back and sell it or something for some reason, like that's gonna show up, and it's securing our investment as the person,
ownership, that we're gonna eventually buy it, so they can't go around us and sell
right.
it.
Exactly. So that's important. That's how you control that property, right? So that's important. So all right, let's see what we got on the next one. Yeah, so we just kind of talked about, this is more like the Airbnb of why we like doing it this way. Like, um, cash flow is great for those of you that are doing arbitrage and renting and then re-renting. But the way the market's going right now, why not build yourself some wealth, build yourself some equity, not just in the cash flow, and you do it by taking this strategy right here and applying it.
Yeah, and just because we have short-term rental, we just throw that up there because people love short-term rentals right now. I get a gazillion and one questions. But long-term tenants, again, we do rentals with travel nurses. So that's another like short-term tenant strategy that you could use on one of these. The reality is just locking down the real estate. So looking at the numbers, locking down the real estate, and whatever you want to do on the backside to get rid of that property, great. You know what I mean? That's up to you. What's your cash flow look like? What's the time you want to put into it?
Controlling it.
Do you want a property management? Yeah, just control the property.
So this is an example, right, of that. I think this is the house you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the examples. So out of area landlord, rents 1,400. Our projected cash flow was 2,100. It's actually looking much higher. We just did our first month, and it was
We're
over that,
yeah, we're
wasn't
at
it?
like 2450 right now. And that's on Airbnb VRBO. And that's with like, no reviews starting off. So I'm projecting we already have 3 bookings in that house for the next month. I'm projecting we have a couple people staying, get some more good reviews. And at that point, the sky's the limit. So I'm thinking like we'll be around like 26 to 2,800, which is cool. So like controlling that, we'll be making after expenses, which of course are, the electric, the water, cable. Literally, I think we should make a pretty hefty little cash flow,
Yeah,
$1,000 on that thing.
zero down. We put about 15 grand in updates and repairs and getting it ready for that, but zero down.
Yeah, but if you go to the bank, I keep telling Noah this, like in my mind, I'm like, oh, we put 15,000 in it to paint it, to do this, to stage it, right, to put the furniture. But I'm like, if you traditionally go to the bank and we bought that property, even at the 185, we would have had to put 20% down on that property. Like, think about that.
Traditionally,
Yeah,
yeah.
traditionally. So we put 15 grand, and that's furniture. That's like stuff, assets in it. So it's just kind of interesting.
Toilet paper, 15 grand.
Yeah, it's crazy when you say, yeah, wood, the price of wood's up right now. But yeah, like it's just cool to see how you can leverage and do. And as Noah said, ours is a 3-1, a little bit smaller, but we know 2 investors, actually mutual friends, that flipped on that street. And then my good friend lived 2 doors down from this house and sold. So there's comps all the way up to 325 in that neighborhood.
Yeah, the house on the right, I think it just sold for, the chat box is blocking, but I think it was 325. And then the one on the left is a friend of ours. They're 2 doors down, just went for 310. So when we see that, it's like, gosh, why would we just do the cash flow when we can secure a position, get the thing up and running, and then take it to the bank when it's producing and cash out, refinance, and
Or sell it. Who
or
knows?
sell it.
Yeah, maybe we find a better investment opportunity. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, we just did that with a condo. So
Yep. And this is taking over subject 2, which is another strategy. Great example of this is the house on the right there. That's off of Killian, I think.
yeah, that's in the Northeast. That
Yep.
was a neighborhood off of Hardwood. I can't remember the name of the subdivision, but this was a unique deal that was just like, what did this just happen? So there was a guy that owned this house that moved to Seattle. And when he moved to Seattle, because his house wasn't owner occupied anymore, the taxes in South Carolina jumped from 4 to 6%. So it threw his mortgage from $800 a month up to like $1,350 a month. So when he left and moved to Seattle, he was like, I don't care. I'm starting a new life. I'm moving. I'm just gonna get rid of this property. Ironically, his mom lived in Charleston, and she was like so afraid of him foreclosing on a home because that's the route he was going. He was like 3 months behind, or 3 or 4 months behind on payments. She was like, oh my gosh, it's going to ruin his credit. Like he's not going to be able to buy another home. And he actually didn't care because he had already bought another home in Seattle. So he was kind of like, what do I need my credit for? She actually posted an ad on Craigslist that said, house in foreclosure, please help me. Or house in pre-foreclosure. And I'm like, is this legit? You see those things and you're like, oh, it's probably a scam. I called it and it was legit. It was his mother. She was like, listen, my son moved to Seattle. I don't know what he's thinking, but can you help me with this? And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. What's the deal? So what ended up happening with this one is the behind monthly payments, I think at that point were like give or take around $3,500. And this house was like in really good condition. It needed just the carpets cleaned and like, I mean, it was great. It was like livable, nice neighborhood. But the rents in that area were about $1,100 a month. And like I said, his payment had bumped up to 13 because of taxes. But we knew a way to get those taxes down. Like we had a system with the tax office of filing paperwork and to get the taxes back, or to get the tax down, to get the payment back down to 850. So we ended up basically taking this property over subject to the mortgage. That meaning, again, the mortgage stayed in the guy's name. But he deeded the property over to us. So we became rightful owner of that property. His name just stayed on the mortgage. And we were like, hey, I think at that time we had like 24 months. We told his mom and him collectively. He didn't care. He probably, I mean, I probably could still keep this house right now if you really want to know the truth. He didn't care. We could have had this house for 10 years. He was like done with it. But our goal is usually like 2 years to get their name off the mortgage. So what we did was we actually marketed for a tenant that had bruised credit that did a lease to own. So I think they owed on this property at the time. I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but anyway, the property, I know we sold it for right around $148,000. And I think when we took it over, he was about $3,500 behind in payments. And I believe that he owed only about like the low 120s. So what ended up happening was we put a tenant with the lease with the option to purchase in, and she put $8,000 down towards the purchase of the home. So that was $8,000 we got to put in pocket and apply towards the purchase, which also we used to catch up the back payment. So we literally used zero of our own money. And then she paid $1,100 a month payments, which was pretty cool. So we paid the $850 a month mortgage, and we were able to pocket that monthly money. And she ended up, what happened was she was supposed to get her credit up to buy the house, and she had a great job and she never got her credit up. Well, it got to a point finally where I was like, this woman's never going to get her credit up. So I said, listen, you've paid a lot of money towards this house. You know, we don't want to take all your money. She was like, I don't even care. Like we had an agreement, right? I was going to be nice, but she ended up moving out. We listed on the MLS and sold it. So we ended up making money all the way around on that property, and it was a great deal, never really having to put any money in. You're asking how we got the taxes down the state of South Carolina. That's a very ninja process. And this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago we did this.
Yeah, you might have to explain that one in person, Christina.
Reach out to me. This is a process because what happens is they want to see the person that is owning the home. So I'll give you an example. When Noah and I got married, I had my house, in West Columbia, and Noah and I now have our house like that we live in collectively. Well, I never changed the taxes there. That's the truth, because I didn't really think about it, to be honest. And it was both in the same county. So we got a kind little letter in the mail after being married about like a year. And it was like, you can't claim 2 properties as primary. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? How do you know I live in there? Maybe I live in the house part-time and Noah lives over here part-time.
She was ready to divorce me.
Yeah, I was like, we're going to get separated so we can keep low taxes. And then my mom happened to be visiting and she was about to have a heart attack. I was like, I'm kidding. So, so what ends up happening is when you take it over subject to, you technically are the owner, right? Because you've been deeded the property. So you can go down the taxes and change that property to your name. Now, if you own another house in that area, that's not going to work, because then you'll be, again, having dual primary residence, right? But with this lady that did the lease option, we actually ended up putting the paperwork in her name because she was buying, right? And when we did that, that jumped the taxes back down because she was working towards home ownership. Now she didn't end up buying, so that could be a tricky situation. What if she defaulted on the loan and now you switch this paperwork? So you have to be really cautious with the way you're doing your paperwork, like everything. But it worked out to benefit in that property.
Yeah,
so
it might not work every time, but it worked that time for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just cool. Like, you got to think outside the box. I hate to say it as an investor, like, you got to be creative. The cookie cutter, here's how you do it every time, probably isn't going to work. And again, like, the creative financing comes in so big. A lot of this scares people, so they don't do it, because their thought is, oh gosh, well, what if somebody doesn't pay? Now I got to foreclose. So they don't do it. My thought process is, okay, I've got 20 properties. Even if I got to foreclose on this one, I got 19 more making money. I mean, that's like, what if a tenant moves out and I have to float the mortgage? okay, that can happen, right? What if I got laid off from my job? The same thing can happen. So you
Yeah.
got to like get outside of that mindset.
I
But
like it when tenants move out. You know what? Because now you got an empty house and you got options. You're like, all right, where's the market at right now? What do we look at selling it? Do we look at making some improvements and doing something else with
do a
it?
short-term
Should we
rental.
Airbnb it? Like
Yeah.
I like not being tied to one person. Sometimes when all these wholesalers are advertising, hey, tenant in place. To me, when I see tenant in place in a property, I'm like, ugh, like who is this tenant? Like who picked them? Why are they selling if the tenant's in place? They must not be paying it.
See,
Like
I don't think like that.
that's how I think.
I know, like he's one of those. I'm just like, don't care. I'm like, what's this? Is this person paying? Okay, good, get out. I don't know. Like, what's our next? But yeah, it
Yeah.
works both ways. But that's another way we've been able to get some stuff on the MLS or throwing some offers because a lot of investor buyers don't want to mess with properties with tenants in place because their thought right now during the pandemic is no one's paying because that's what the media has told everyone nobody's paying. So for us, it's, really like, hey, let's make an offer on that because I feel like it's negotiable because not everybody's going after it. So keep that in mind too.
Yep. And then one thing you guys know that we're real big on, and I spoke on this at REI Con last month, and that's private money lending. This is, and here's what I'll say about this too. This is not just for flips. Christy's had rental properties funded through private money lenders.
I've forgotten I have one currently
and
that's almost paid off.
still does.
I
So
had,
yeah,
yeah, a private money lender that lived for 15 years on a rental property,
can't
which I forget that it is because I just write him a check monthly.
can't stress it enough. The money's out there. We should always be having conversations with people about what we do as investors and asking them how their money's going for them and are they happy with the results that they're getting, and letting them know, hey, look, we pay people rates of return that are pretty favorable and it's secured by real estate, and just having that roll off the tip of your tongue and being more and more comfortable. Yeah, got to come to the networking event.
Networking is key, but
It is.
listen, I think it's even just talk to anybody, like my
Yeah.
wheelhouse now because we have the kids is not my wheelhouse as it used to be. So that could be like, look, I just started working out again. I went to Orange Theory. There's a ton of people in there. I'm like, just tell them what you do. Everybody loves real estate, right? So that's my networking event without even them knowing it. Like, okay, let me talk to these people.
Yeah, you don't have to come to like a networking event, but
you just gotta open your mouth.
You just got to meet people, and those are great places to meet people.
So whatever your your grocery store you shop at, your gym, whatever you do in your path, talk to everyone. And 2 months ago on our super group, we did one on talking to private money lenders and raising private money lenders. So you can go back and listen to that too. Those are all recorded in REI USA. So go back and check that out because that might help you in tips of how to talk to people and what to do, how to approach them.
Yep, for sure. So this is, the money's out there. You just gotta keep talking to people. I couldn't find it. Hey, I have a really good recording that I did on YouTube that's private that I can send you to. I may have sent it to you. Sent it to a couple of people, but if you want that, let me know. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, reach out to us. You can find us obviously on all social media handles through REI USA. I've had a couple people reach out for random things. Had a gentleman contact me about mobile homes and contracts. So if you email me, definitely we'll get back to you and get that over to you.
For sure. And shout out to AJ. AJ's in here, REI USA member. And a few months ago, we talked private money. He hit me up. I helped him out, and he's funding his first flip using what he learned. And so great job, AJ. And I know anybody watching, we're here to help any way that we can. If you're in the Columbia area, we do a monthly meetup. It's called the Re-Up. We do it the first Wednesday of every month. June
It's free, live.
Free event, June 2nd. It's just networking. This session is all things money. We talked a little bit about creative financing here tonight. So at this event, we're having South Carolina Hard Money, right? South Carolina Hard Money. The founder of that organization, of that fund, is
Carolina. I think it's Carolina.
Carolina Hard Money. Carolina Hard Money. Wendy, she's going to be there.
We're having a traditional lender. Traditional meaning a mortgage broker
got
that does.
A young lady who's done who's had her hands in I think it's over 13,000 mortgages she's assisted on in the state of South Carolina, and then is really excited about some investor products that she has. We've got several agents and investors who are going to be talking creative
Creative.
financing strategies like we were here tonight. And so,
So yeah, so that's a way to catch us live every
you know,
month. And then on here, REI USA, the third Thursday of the month. So we'll talk about different topics every month. But again, we're in the South Carolina market. So if you're looking for contacts, connects, properties, whatever, reach out to us. We're here to help.
yep. And if you want to come visit, we got lots of places to stay.
That's right.
All right. So
So awesome.
you guys have a good night. Any last questions? Anything else we can help you with?
And thank you for attending. It's awesome. Like just one little piece of this, if you just make it your goal to go out this week and apply something or ask. So if you're already making offers, ask about the owner seller financing. It doesn't hurt. What's the worst? They say no. Okay, we've all been rejected before. It's okay. Just keep moving.
You'd be so surprised. I read a fact. I read something before I hopped on here about owner financing, and it said, and it made it sound like it wasn't very common. It said 10% of mortgages or something like that are owner financed. Only 10%. And then I got to thinking, well, shoot, that's a lot, actually, 10%. And if you're making 10 offers or get 10 deals accepted, and one of them's an owner finance, boom, there's your rentals.
Yeah, so just ask. That's it with everything. Like if I could just tell people to channel your inner child, our 6-year-old asks about everything. Can I have a snack? Can I have a drink? Can I do this? Can I go outside? Can I go to the playground? And finally you just break. You're like, yes, 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 yes. So it's no different for people. Just keep asking. Like it's awesome. Like we should all just ask. It's what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone says no. But what if they say yes? Like that's awesome. That's all you're looking for. The one yes.
Then you got so many more options. Now you don't have to go look for a private money lender.
Right.
Because you asked and they said yes.
And half of these people seller financing, if they've got multiple properties, remember they could be your private money lender. A lot of people that have properties can, lend. They've got money. So just keep that in mind. Don't try to convert the people that are brand newbie. Just talk to the people that are already in it.
Cool. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Connect with us online on Facebook, Instagram. If you have any questions, hit us up.
All right, guys. Have a great evening. We'll see you back next month, third Thursday.
All right. Take care. See ya. Bye.